Manikk MIDI Through and manikk Otto MIDI are two modules that can be used to solve some MIDI issues in your rack. Both have one MIDI input and multiple MIDI through outputs. Both has also some extra MIDI through outputs on the backside in a pin strip. This can be used to connect to other modules internally inside your eurorack. Have a look at the website for more information about these two modules. This is the manikk MIDI Through module. It has MIDI inputs with both DIN and TRS jack connectors, but only one input can be used at the time. On the output side it has two DIN MIDI Through outputs, 4 TRS jack MIDI Through outputs and 4 extra outputs on a pin stripe on the back side. All the outputs can be used at the same time. We connect a MIDI cable with a signal from the computer where we have a MIDI keyboard connected. The LED indicator shows activity on the MIDI input. The TRS MIDI Through outputs can deliver MIDI to TRS MIDI Type A or Type B cables. This is a short TRS MIDI Type A cable with female DIN connector. This is a long TRS MIDI Type A cable with male DIN connector. Each jack is configurable individually. The configuration is done on the backside by soldering solder pad switches. Here is the solder pads for the MIDI input jack. Up here is the solder pads behind each of the 4 output jacks. You can read more about this on the website. And here is a pin strip with 4 extra MIDI Through outputs. If you want to use them as extra MIDI Through outputs, you can connect connectors here and use the pull-up and TX pins. All of these have 220 ohm resistors in the signal lines and for the pull-up pins. You can also connect these pins to an Arduino UART RX input pin, then you use the TX and GND pins from this connector. Type A, Type B, This is the manikk Otto, with a MIDI Through add-on. It is based on 2 parts, the Otto stereo and the MIDI add-on board. You can buy these as separate items, but it is better and cheaper to buy them as a complete module, the Otto MIDI. At the top there is a LED indicator that shows incoming MIDI activity. If you buy the separate parts, you need to drill this hole yourself. Here you connect the eurorack power connector. In this pin strip you will find 3 extra MIDI Through outputs with TX and pull-up, with 220 ohm resistors. You will also find tip and ring signals for jack 6, 7 and 8. Read more on the website. Here you configure each jack by soldering. Type A, Type B, or not used at all. This module is configured as Type A for jack 1 to 5. Jack 6 to 8 are not soldered here, and can therefore be used from the pin stripe instead. If you solder jack 6, 7 or 8 here, you should not use it from the pin strip at the same time. Choose only one use case for each jack. Here you can see the Otto MIDI sitting in a eurorack. Jack 1 is MIDI input coming from a computer with a MIDI keyboard. Jack 2 to 5 are MIDI Through outputs. The LED indicator shows MIDI input activity. On the backside you can configure each of the 8 jacks to be either Type A or Type B by soldering the solder pads in one of 2 directions. We can use MIDI TRS cables to connect to other MIDI equipment. As you can see, The LED flashes both on the Otto MIDI and on the out brake. Now we have changed to MIDI channel 2 on the out brake. On the backside we have connected MIDI through outputs from the pin strip to the MIDI input on the manikk out brake. This way we don't need any cables on the front. The MIDI cable is internal in the eurorack.